The quantum analyzer's gentle hum provided the only soundtrack to Dr. Elena Vasquez's solitary evening in Laboratory 7, 300 meters beneath Kepler 442b's crimson surface. She'd been cataloging mineral samples for the past 6 hours, each crystalline specimen more mundane than the last, when the seismic sensors began their frantic beeping. The readouts showed something impossible. A metallic object, roughly humanoid in shape, had just crashed through 17 layers of sedimentary rock and landed in the primary excavation chamber. Elena grabbed her emergency kit and descended deeper into the colony's bowels, her boots echoing against the polished metal corridors. The mining elevators had been shut down for maintenance, forcing her to take the service ladders that wound through the facility's mechanical heart. By the time she reached the excavation site, her curiosity had thoroughly overwhelmed her caution. The crash site resembled a perfectly circular crater, its edges still glowing with residual heat. At its center lay a figure that made Elena's scientific training collide spectacularly with her common sense. The woman appeared entirely human, save for ears that stretched upward in elegant points, their tips nearly brushing her shoulders. Her clothing seemed to shift between solid matter and pure energy, rippling like liquid starlight. Elena approached cautiously, her medical scanner chirping with readings that defied every law of physics she'd learned in her 20-year career. The woman's vital signs registered as stable, but her cellular structure appeared to exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously. When Elena reached out to check for injuries, the woman's eyes snapped open, revealing irises that swirled with nebular colors. "Your gravitational constant is surprisingly pleasant," the woman said, sitting up with fluid grace that suggested bones were merely optional. "Though your atmospheric pressure makes my ears itch." Elena blinked rapidly, wondering if the lab's recycled air had finally driven her to hallucination. "I'm sorry, did you just critique our planet's physics while complaining about ear discomfort?" "Among other things, yes." The woman brushed crystalline dust from her shifting garments. "I am Lyra. You are the human who's been broadcasting mathematical theorems at the mineral deposits, aren't you? Your colleagues find it quite amusing." Heat rushed to Elena's cheeks. She had indeed been testing whether certain equations might resonate with the planet's unique crystal formations, a theory her fellow researchers had deemed charmingly eccentric. "You've been listening to our communications." Lyra stood with movements that seemed to bend space around her. "Not intentionally. Your quantum encryption is rather loud. It's like trying to sleep next to a supernova that insists on reciting poetry." She paused, tilting her elongated head with genuine curiosity. "Speaking of which, what exactly is coffee, and why does everyone here worship it with such religious fervor?" Elena found herself laughing despite the surreal circumstances. "It's a caffeinated beverage that keeps researchers functioning on 3 hours of sleep. Would you like to try some? I would be honored to participate in this sacred ritual." Back in Laboratory 7, Elena's attempts to explain coffee preparation became an exercise in cultural translation. Lyra approached the beverage synthesizer with the reverence of an archaeologist examining ancient artifacts, her pointed ears twitching with concentration as she studied each control surface. "So this device transforms basic molecules into a psychoactive substance that humans consume for enhanced cognitive function?" Lyra asked, pressing what she apparently thought was the activation button. Elena lunged forward as the emergency sprinkler system engaged, drenching the laboratory in recycled water. "That's the fire suppression system." They stood dripping in the lab's harsh lighting, Lyra's expression shifting between embarrassment and scientific fascination. "Your safety protocols are remarkably efficient. Also, I appear to be malfunctioning in this moisture." Elena couldn't help but grin as she grabbed towels from the supply cabinet. "Welcome to human engineering. We excel at making simple things complicated and complicated things explosive." As they dried off, Alina noticed that Lyra's touch seemed to interact strangely with the lab equipment. When she steadied herself against the quantum analyzer, its displays began showing data streams that shouldn't exist, patterns within patterns that suggested layers of reality Alina had never imagined. "You're not entirely human, are you?" Alina asked, though the pointed ears had already answered that question. Lyra's expression grew serious, though her lips maintained a slight smile. "My people call ourselves the Ethel. We were once numerous, spread across the galaxy like seeds on cosmic winds. Now we are few, and those few are hunted." "Hunted by whom?" "The hegemony. They seek what my people guard." Lyra moved to Alina's workstation, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface without actually touching it. The screens responded to her presence, displaying star charts Alina had never seen. "My research partner, Kale, was taken 3 cycles ago. I've been tracking their movements, but their ships employ quantum shadows that bend space around them." Alina studied the star charts, her xenolinguist training helping her recognize pattern structures that suggested meaning. "These formations, they're not random, are they? They're some kind of map." "Very good. Your species may be younger than morning mist, but you possess remarkable intuitive leaps." Lyra's praise carried genuine warmth. "These mark the locations of archived knowledge, libraries built by civilizations that vanished before your son was born. The hegemony believes this knowledge will grant them dominion over space and time itself." "And will it?" Lyra's expression darkened. "Power without wisdom is the shortest path to extinction. My people learned this truth when our own empire fell to ambition and hubris." Alina synthesized 2 cups of actual coffee, this time keeping Lyra safely away from any buttons. As they sat among the humming equipment, sharing the bitter brew that had fueled countless late-night research sessions, Alina found herself drawn into Lyra's story. The Ethel had once been gardeners of knowledge, cultivating wisdom across countless worlds until their own success had bred complacency. When the Great Collapse came, only a scattered few had survived, dedicating their extended lives to protecting what remained. "So you're librarians," Alina said. "Cosmic librarians with really impressive ears and questionable understanding of human technology." "When you phrase it like that, our ancient mission sounds rather mundane," Lyra replied, her melodic laugh filling the laboratory. "Though I prefer keepers of infinite mysteries to librarians." "How about dangerously attractive archive specialists?" Lyra's cheeks flushed with colors that cycled through the visible spectrum. "Your species has a remarkable talent for flattery disguised as taxonomy." As the hours passed, Alina learned that Lyra's ship had been damaged. Alina's morning began with the colony's breakfast synthesizer, producing what could charitably be called protein paste with optimistic flavoring. She stared at the gray substance, while Lyra examined her own portion with the fascination of a xenobiologist discovering new life forms. "Your people consume this voluntarily?" Lyra asked, prodding the paste with her utensil. Her elongated ears drooped slightly, suggesting disappointment. "We prefer to think of it as fuel rather than food," Alina replied, taking a determinedly cheerful bite. "The trick is not to think about texture, flavor, or the fact that it's probably made from recycled atmospheric processors." Lyra attempted a small taste and immediately reached for Alina's coffee cup. "Your species' survival instinct are clearly more developed than I initially assessed." Alina had spent the previous night researching hegemony prison, transports through the colony's limited database, cross-referencing shipping manifests and patrol routes, while Lyra interfaced with the quantum communication array. The results painted a grim picture. Kale was being held aboard a heavily shielded vessel that made regular stops at interrogation facilities throughout the outer systems. "We'll need supplies," Alina said, pulling up her requisition interface on her personal tablet. "Plasma cutters, zero-gravity suits, maybe some of those new quantum scramblers the mining teams use for clearing unstable rock formations." And how do you propose we obtain these items without alerting your supervisors to our activities? Lyra asked, her voice carrying the patient tone of someone who had clearly dealt with enthusiastic but impractical rescue plans before. Alina grinned with what she hoped appeared to be confidence rather than mild panic. Leave that to me. I've been working here for 8 years. I know exactly how to game the system. 2 hours later, Alina stood in Dr. Hoffman's administrative office, watching her carefully prepared explanation unravel like a poorly constructed sweater. Let me understand this correctly, Dr. Hoffman said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. You want to requisition military-grade plasma cutters, atmospheric breach suits, and quantum field generators for a mineralogy survey. Advanced geological sampling, Alina corrected, hoping her voice sounded more authoritative than desperate. The crystalline formations in Sector 7 Beta show unusual resonance patterns that might indicate rare Earth deposits. Dr. Hoffman consulted his tablet, scrolling through what Alina presumed was either her personnel file or her psychological evaluation history. Dr. Vasquez, yesterday you requested 17 kilograms of high-density explosive charges for what you described as precision rock sampling. Alina felt heat creeping up her neck. Geology is a surprisingly dynamic field. And the emergency medical kit, rated for zero-gravity trauma response. Rocks can be unpredictable. Dr. Hoffman removed his glasses and cleaned them with deliberate precision. Alina, I've known you since you arrived here. You're one of our most methodical researchers. Your idea of adventure is staying up past midnight to catalog mineral specimens. This sudden interest in extreme geology concerns me. Alina glanced toward the office window, where she could see Lyra waiting in the corridor, attempting to appear inconspicuous while clearly studying the colony's internal architecture with professional interest. Her pointed ears were carefully hidden beneath a maintenance worker's cap Alina had borrowed from the equipment locker. Perhaps I'm having a midlife crisis, Alina suggested weakly. You're 34. An early midlife crisis. Dr. Hoffman sighed with the weariness of someone who managed a facility full of brilliant but occasionally eccentric scientists. I'll approve the basic geological equipment, but the explosive charges and military hardware require authorization from Colonial Command. That means paperwork, background checks, and approximately 6 weeks of bureaucratic review. Alina's heart sank. 6 weeks would put them well past any reasonable rescue window, assuming Kale survived that long and hegemony custody. What if I could provide additional justification? Scientific papers, theoretical frameworks, maybe some preliminary data suggesting significant mineral deposits. Alina, Dr. Hoffman's tone carried paternal concern. Are you in some kind of trouble? Because if there's something you need help with, we can discuss it confidentially. Alina felt a sudden surge of guilt. Dr. Hoffman had always been supportive of her research, even when her theoretical papers veered into territory that other facilities considered too speculative. The idea of deceiving him sat uncomfortably in her stomach alongside the questionable breakfast paste. I'm fine, she said finally, just excited about some new research possibilities. New research involving zero-gravity medical kits and explosive charges. Mineralogy is evolving as a discipline. Dr. Hoffman replaced his glasses with a gesture that Alina recognized as his preparation for delivering administrative decisions. I can approve standard geological survey equipment. Anything beyond that goes through proper channels. I'm sorry, Alina, but those are the regulations. Alina left the administrative section feeling like a deflated balloon, her grand plan reduced to basic rock hammers and sample containers. She found Lyra examining a wall-mounted display showing the colony's emergency evacuation procedures. Your facility's safety protocols are remarkably thorough, Lyra observed. Though I notice they don't account for quantum phase displacement or temporal anomalies. We're a mining colony, not a theoretical physics laboratory, Elena replied glumly. Also, we didn't get the equipment. I suspected as much. Your expression suggests either digestive distress or administrative disappointment. Elena slumped against the corridor wall. How do people in your civilization handle bureaucracy? Please tell me the Ethel have figured out some elegant solution to requisition forms and approval processes. Lyra's laugh carried musical undertones that seemed to resonate with the metal walls around them. The Ethel developed beyond such concerns millennia ago. We simply manifest what we require through directed consciousness and quantum manipulation. Show off. However, Lyra continued, I spent several decades studying primitive civilizations, including their resource allocation systems. Perhaps I can suggest alternative approaches. Elena raised an eyebrow. Are you proposing we steal mining equipment? I prefer creative resource reallocation. Your colony's maintenance schedules are quite predictable, and I've noticed that equipment often sits unused for extended periods while awaiting routine inspections. That's definitely stealing. Technically, it's temporary unauthorized borrowing for the greater good of galactic peace and individual liberty. Elena considered this. Her academic career had been built on following proper procedures and maintaining meticulous documentation. The idea of circumventing official channels felt foreign and slightly thrilling, like discovering that comfortable shoes could also be fashionable. What did you have in mind? Lyra's ears perked up with what Elena was learning to recognize as her planning expression. Your mining crews rotate shifts every 12 hours. During the transition period, equipment bays are minimally supervised. The quantum scramblers you mentioned are stored in Section 4, which connects to the service tunnels you showed me yesterday. And if we're caught, then we explain that we were conducting unauthorized safety inspections to ensure proper equipment functionality. Elena laughed despite her nervousness. The maintenance pod Elena had borrowed, handled like a caffeinated rhinoceros with directional issues, which she discovered as they lurched through the asteroid field's outer boundary. Warning lights blinked with the enthusiasm of a disco, while the navigation computer cheerfully announced their imminent collision, with approximately 17 different space rocks per minute. Your piloting technique is certainly distinctive, Lyra observed, gripping her safety harness as Elena wrestled with the controls. I particularly admire how you're using gravitational slingshot maneuvers completely by accident. I learned to fly these things hauling ore containers through stable space lanes, Elena replied through gritted teeth. Nobody mentioned asteroids would be so mobile. Asteroids generally maintain predictable orbital patterns. However, this particular field appears to be influenced by quantum fluctuations from the nearby pulsar. The rocks are essentially dancing to cosmic radiation. Elena watched their target vessel appear on the scanner, a sleek hegemony transport that looked like it could ram through asteroids for entertainment. Dancing rocks, naturally, because regular stationary rocks would be too simple. Lyra's ears twitched as she interfaced with the pod's sensor array. I'm detecting the transport's quantum signature. Kale is definitely aboard, though his biosigns appear sluggish. Sluggish how? Either he's unconscious or he's attempting to meditate through traumatic interrogation. Knowing Kale, both possibilities are equally likely. Elena guided their pod behind a particularly large asteroid that looked like someone had sculpted it into an abstract representation of cosmic indigestion. The transport moved through the field with mechanical precision, its shields deflecting smaller debris while larger rocks seemed to simply move aside. They're using gravity manipulation, Lyra explained. Standard hegemony technology for navigating hazardous space. Unfortunately, it also makes their ships nearly impossible to approach undetected. Elena studied the transport's movement patterns, her mind automatically cataloging the rhythms and intervals. Years of monitoring mining equipment had trained her to recognize mechanical patterns, and something about the hegemony ship's behavior struck her as oddly familiar. "What if we don't try to be undetected?" Alina asked. "What if we pretend to be something else entirely?" Lyra's expression shifted to curious interest. "Explain." Alina activated the pod's emergency beacon, broadcasting a distress signal that immediately caught the transport's attention. Within minutes, a communication channel opened with crackling efficiency. "Unidentified vessel, this is Hegemony Transport Valiant. State your emergency and prepare for assistance protocols." Alina cleared her throat and attempted to sound appropriately distressed. "Hegemony Transport, this is Mining Pod 77 Alpha from Kepler Colony. We're experiencing catastrophic life support failure following asteroid impact. Please respond." Lyra stared at Alina with what appeared to be professional admiration mixed with concern for her mental health. "You're requesting assistance from the people we're planning to rob." "I'm creating opportunity through misdirection," Alina whispered back. "Trust me." The transport's response came through with bureaucratic efficiency. "Mining Pod 77 Alpha, maintain position for emergency boarding procedures. Prepare to transfer to our medical bay." Alina felt a surge of triumph that lasted approximately 30 seconds, until she realized they now had to actually dock with a heavily armed military vessel while pretending to be dying miners. "Lyra, please tell me you have some ideas about what happens next." "Several ideas, though most involve significant improvisation and possibly some property damage." The transport's docking bay opened with mechanical precision, drawing their maintenance pod inside with tractor beams that felt uncomfortably like being swallowed by a technological whale. Alina's bravado evaporated as armed guards in hegemony uniforms surrounded their pod, weapons ready but not quite aimed. "Stay calm," Lyra murmured. "I can interface with their internal systems once we're inside." "How is that helpful if we're in prison cells?" "Optimism, Dr. Vasquez. Your species invented the concept for situations exactly like this." The pod's hatch cycled open, revealing a security officer whose expression suggested he'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. "I'm Lieutenant Torres. You reported life support failure." Alina clutched her chest dramatically. "The environmental processors started venting toxic gases after we hit that asteroid. My colleague here has been unconscious for the past 20 minutes." Lyra, playing her part with theatrical commitment, allowed herself to slump against the pod's interior while making convincing unconscious sounds. Her pointed ears remained hidden beneath Alina's hastily modified mining helmet. Lieutenant Torres consulted his scanner with professional skepticism. "Your atmospheric readings appear normal." "The emergency scrubbers kicked in just before you picked us up," Alina explained, hoping her voice carried the right mixture of relief and residual panic. "But we need medical attention. Prolonged exposure to recycled toxins can cause cellular damage." "Of course it can," Torres muttered, waving them toward the medical bay. "Follow me and don't touch anything." Alina helped Lyra walk through the transport's corridors, noting the ship's layout while maintaining her concerned colleague performance. The medical bay turned out to be a sterile white room, equipped with scanners that would immediately reveal Lyra's non-human physiology. "Just need to run some basic scans," the medical technician announced, powering up equipment that hummed with ominous efficiency. Lyra chose that moment to regain consciousness, sitting up with dramatic flair. "Where are we? What happened to the asteroid?" "You're aboard a hegemony transport," Alina said quickly. "They rescued us from the pod." Lyra's eyes widened with what Alina hoped appeared to be grateful confusion rather than tactical assessment. "Hegemony. I've heard you have the most advanced medical facilities in the galaxy. Perhaps you could examine my ear infection while we're here." She began reaching for her helmet, clearly planning to reveal her distinctive ears as a distraction. Alina caught her hand before she could complete the gesture. "The infection's not serious," Alina said hastily. "Just some minor irritation from the atmospheric recyclers." The medical technician frowned at his scanner readings. I'm showing some unusual cellular patterns. Perhaps we should run more detailed diagnostics. Alina felt panic rising in her throat when the ship's alarm system suddenly activated, filling the medical bay with flashing lights and urgent announcements about unauthorized access to restricted areas. Someone's trying to break into the detention blocks, Lieutenant Torres announced through the intercom. All personnel to emergency stations. Alina and Lyra exchanged glances as the medical technician hurried from the room, leaving them alone with expensive equipment and suddenly unguarded corridors. Did you just trigger their security system? Alina whispered. I may have accidentally activated several subsystems while attempting to locate Kale, Lyra admitted. Your theory about improvisation appears to be prophetic. They slipped from the medical bay into corridors now filled with running personnel and blaring alarms. Lyra pressed her hand against a wall panel, her eyes closing in concentration as she interfaced with the ship's quantum network. Kale is 3 levels down, detention cell 7. However, I seem to have also activated the entertainment system throughout the entire ship. Alina became aware of operatic music swelling through the corridor speakers. Some ancient earth composition about tragic love and inevitable doom. Opera. Your species' musical preferences are quite dramatic. I thought it would provide appropriate cover for our movements. They descended through maintenance shafts, while Puccini's greatest hits echoed through the vessel, creating a surreal backdrop for their rescue mission. Alina found herself suppressing laughter at the absurdity of sneaking through a military ship while classical music provided their soundtrack. There, Lyra whispered as they reached the detention level. Cell 7. Through the transparent aluminum barrier, Alina saw a figure that shared Lyra's distinctive ears and elegant features. Kale appeared unconscious, connected to monitoring equipment that pulsed with soft lights. He's alive, Lyra said with relief that made her voice tremble. But they've been using neural probes. His mind may be damaged. Alina studied the cell's locking mechanism, while Lyra placed her hand against the barrier. The lock appeared to be quantum encrypted, far beyond anything Alina could bypass with conventional tools. Can you open it? Yes. Alina's breakfast had just reached the consistency of particularly ambitious wallpaper paste when her communication console erupted with enough priority alerts to wake the dead, the hibernating, and possibly some nearby asteroids. Commander Voss's face appeared on the screen with the sort of smile that suggested he'd been practicing it in the mirror while planning elaborate revenge scenarios. Dr. Alina Vasquez, he said with theatrical formality. Or should I say, accomplice to interstellar fugitives and thief of hegemony property. Alina glanced at Lyra and Kale, who were sharing what appeared to be a private conversation conducted entirely through ear twitching. I think you have me confused with someone more interesting than a mineral cataloger. Your quantum communication signatures tell a different story. We've been monitoring your colony's transmissions since you first harbored the ethel fugitive. Voss leaned closer to his screen. Did you really think stealing a maintenance pod and infiltrating our transport would go unnoticed? Kale, apparently recovered enough for conversation, studied Voss with academic interest. Commander Voss, isn't it? Your reputation for persistent mediocrity precedes you throughout several star systems. I prefer thorough to mediocre, Voss replied with strained patience. And I've finally located the last 2 ethel archivists in known space. Alina felt her stomach performing gymnastics that would have impressed Olympic judges. Last 2. Lyra's expression hardened into something that suggested she'd stopped finding their situation amusing. The others. Collected over the past several cycles. Your people's knowledge proved quite valuable once properly extracted. Voss's smile widened with genuine pleasure. Though I admit, tracking you required more effort than anticipated. Your human friend's amateur rescue attempt was surprisingly effective. Alina realized that their successful escape had been exactly what Voss wanted, a way to trace their movements and locate their hiding place. We led you right to us. Eventually, yes. Though I must commend your creativity with the opera distraction. My crew found it quite entertaining. Kale struggled to his feet, leaning against the pod's wall with obvious effort. What do you want, Voss? If you plan to capture us, you'd have done so already. I want the beacon protocols, the location of the primary archive, the quantum keys that will awaken what sleeps in the galactic core. Voss consulted something off-screen. Your neural probing provided fragments, but I require complete access. Alina looked between her alien companions, reading tension in the set of their pointed ears and the careful stillness of their expressions. What exactly sleeps in the galactic core? Knowledge, Lyra said quietly. The combined wisdom of civilizations that predated the current galactic community by millions of years. Information that could advance any species beyond their wildest technological dreams. Or destroy them completely, Kale added with characteristic pessimism. The ancients who built the archive didn't leave it unguarded. They understood the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Voss's laugh carried no humor whatsoever. Philosophical concerns from a dying species. How quaint. You have 30 minutes to provide the access codes, or I demonstrate why the hegemony has successfully eliminated every other archive guardian. The transmission ended, leaving them alone with the weight of impossible choices and Alina's increasingly cold breakfast. So, Alina said, attempting levity despite her racing pulse. On a scale of 1 to galactic catastrophe, how bad would it be if Voss gets this information? Imagine giving a child access to weapons that could reshape reality itself, Lyra replied. Then imagine that child has the emotional maturity of a particularly vindictive asteroid. Alina activated the pod's engines, her hands moving with surprising steadiness. Then we don't give it to him. Alina, Kale said gently, there are dozens of hegemony ships surrounding this asteroid field. Escape is mathematically improbable. Good thing I've always been terrible at math. Alina piloted them toward the asteroid's crystalline formations, where the interference patterns created sensor shadows that might hide their movements. Lyra, can you interface with these crystals the way you do with quantum systems? Lyra pressed her hand against the pod's hull, her consciousness extending toward the alien formations. These structures are artificial. They're not natural crystals, they're archive markers. Alina felt excitement cutting through her fear. Markers for what? A beacon node, one of the original Ethel installations. Lyra's eyes widened with understanding. Alina, you didn't just find a hiding place. You found one of the primary access points to the galactic archive. Kale managed a weak smile. Your species' talent for accidental discovery continues to astound me. Alina landed their pod in a crystalline canyon that hummed with energies that made her teeth ache and her hair stand on end. As they emerged onto the asteroid's surface, the formations around them began responding to Lyra and Kale's presence, shifting from dormant crystal into active quantum processors that painted the canyon in patterns of living light. It's beautiful, Alina breathed, watching geometric shapes flow across the crystal surfaces like frozen music. It's also extremely dangerous, Kale observed. These systems were designed to test worthiness before granting access to knowledge that could reshape the fundamental nature of reality. Lyra moved among the crystals with reverent familiarity, her consciousness merging with systems that had waited eons for activation. The archive is responding. It recognizes us as Ethel, but it's requesting additional verification. Alina studied the patterns flowing through the crystals, her xenolinguist training helping her recognize structural elements that suggested communication protocols. What kind of verification? Proof that we understand the responsibility that comes with such knowledge, that we won't repeat the mistakes that led to our civilization's fall. Lyra's voice carried centuries of accumulated sadness. The archive requires demonstration of wisdom, not just intelligence. Alina thought about her conversation with Dr. Hoffman, about the weight of deception and the cost of good intentions. What if the verification isn't just for you too? What if it's for all of us? Before either Ethel could respond, hegemony fighters screamed overhead, their weapons charging with ominous whines. Voss's voice echoed across the canyon through external speakers. Fascinating technology, but ultimately irrelevant. Surrender the access codes or watch your human friend discover how hegemony plasma cannons interact with organic matter. Alina felt terror and determination competing for space in her chest. Looking at Lyra and Kale, seeing the mixture of resignation and defiance in their expressions, she made a decision that surprised her with its clarity. "You want the archive?" Alina called out, activating her pod's external communications. "Come and get it yourself." She pressed her hand against the nearest crystal formation, her consciousness reaching out toward the alien systems with desperate hope. The crystals responded to her touch, their patterns shifting into configurations that made her brain hurt and her soul sing simultaneously. "Alina, what are you doing?" Lyra shouted over the rising harmonic frequencies. "Something probably stupid and definitely irreversible." Alina replied as the archive systems embraced her thoughts, testing her intentions with merciless thoroughness. Images flooded her mind. Civilizations rising and falling, knowledge used for creation and destruction, the endless cycle of species learning to transcend their limitations or being consumed by their ambitions. The archive asked her a simple question that contained infinite complexity. What will you do with wisdom beyond your species' current understanding? Alina thought about her quiet life cataloging minerals, about the joy of discovering new knowledge and sharing it with colleagues who cared about truth more than power. She thought about Lyra and Kale, refugees from a fallen civilization dedicated to protecting what their ancestors had learned through triumph and tragedy. Her answer came not in words but in understanding. Knowledge belongs to those who will use it to help others grow, not to control them. The canyon erupted in light that turned the hegemony fighters into distant shadows. Alina felt the